Hey everybody, Ozark Hillman. So I want to talk to you really quick today about how the Daily Wire, and really this is a lot of broader conservative pundits, if you will, really more specifically what you would call neocon. There's a specific ideology and a specific history behind that group, but how specifically the Daily Wire, which has gained a massive control of what people are calling Con Inc., kind of the conservative media, if you will, how they're really pushing us toward World War III. And that's not hyperbole. That's not, and you think, but wait a minute, haven't they spoken up against the corruption with Zelensky and how it's really should not be our affair, and it's the Western oligarchs and Biden's corruption and Ukraine is the reason we're even involved in the first place? Well, yeah, they do point all that out, but it might not be necessarily through Ukraine. It's actually through Iran. You've already seen whispers of this. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, um, she is kind of a part to varying degrees. There's some differences of opinions between different people, but the one thing they all seem to be hardline in favor of, including many Democrats, by the way, on the Senate side, is they want us to deal with Iran. Now, well, what business is it of ours? How does it affect us? Well, it doesn't. So that's the thing. Credit Suisse recently collapsed. You're not going to hear this in any of the media. The Credit Suisse recently collapsed. The bank in Switzerland. Switzerland is a neutral country, uses a financial refuge. A lot of people know this. There's some major financial trading centers in the world. Switzerland is sort of a banking refuge. London, New York, Tokyo. A lot of people not realize Israel, but especially Israel, especially um, with tech. And Israel, interestingly, was apparently tipped off by the Fed. Again, you're not going to hear this. Don't take my word for any of this. Go and look any of this stuff up. Israel was tipped off by the Fed, and they pulled their money out of Silicon Valley Bank before it collapsed. Which, yeah, it's supposed to be illegal, and a lot of people are still left holding the bag and trying to get their money back after their $5 billion of woke investments and equity and diversity commitments completely collapsed. And as Twitter really proved when they fired 75% of their employees and it still ran perfectly fine, tech itself is really an entire fake house of cards, pushing a lot of this inflation with no real productivity, no real tangible GDP, just an artificially, inflated economy. Well, the reason Credit Suisse collapsed, and I promise all this is relevant, that's why I'm talking about it, is because China actually got involved between Saudi Arabia and Iran, maybe for their own interest, maybe to gain power, probably to counteract the U.S. petrodollar, which Saudi Arabia is a big key to. Saudi Arabia has the fifth largest military on the planet. A lot of people don't know that. They take all this oil money. They're extremely extravagant. They buy luxury Lamborghinis, build a new high rise in the middle of a desert. Really, not much of anything besides oil to back it, right? And China has now brokered a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran. That is a big deal. One is Sunni, one is Shia. Extremely different historic perceptions on the Muslim religion, and but especially between Saudi Arabia tied with the West and Iran, which is allied kind of sometimes tentatively, sometimes strongly, depending on how much they're facing against the West. Iran, Russia, and China are somewhat tentative three-way allies. So since China actually brokered this peace, one of the things that apparently is the deal behind it, the Saudis pulled out of Credit Suisse. That immediately caused a financial collapse. Now, again, the media is trying to underscore this, not really talk about it, but this whole waging war in Ukraine thing is it's collapsing us. It was collapsing the energy sector, making housing unaffordable, even as they're bringing in tens of millions of migrants constantly in Europe, which they're still trying to pay for, and displacing the ethnic European population. And just like what happened to a lot of white Americans in the U.S. being violently run out of our own big cities, and then that being blamed on us after we were ethnically cleansed, and the economic damage that's had and still had on us, along with illegal migration, tens of millions of them, and everything that's still happening in Europe. So while we're dealing with reeling from all of this, this is what it comes back to. Ben Shapiro left Breitbart back when he worked for him back in the day, and his argument, Breitbart's just being too racist. What? Really? I mean, Breitbart was kind of plain vanilla MAGA conservative, normicon, talking about any issues on the border or anything like that. Of course, it's deemed racist. And of course, Ben Shapiro, when it's convenient, he will play right into that leftist game. Why? Because it's part of that neocon agenda. George W. Bush, Liz Cheney, these are all part of the neocons, but the way to differentiate themselves from George W. Bush and Liz Cheney and all them that actually, endorsed Biden or because their globalist agenda is so important to them, neocons, to being involved in the Middle East. and the globalist American empire, that they would rather endorse Biden and all the rainbow flag agenda on your children, the transing the kids, all this stuff. They'd rather be involved with that than endorse Trump. And Trump is largely caved to the same powerful lobbies as well, by the way. Trump did everything he could to take up for these powerful lobbies that are not in his own interests. But the key thing is the Daily Wire has hired Jordan Peterson. He went and interviewed Netanyahu in Israel, started talking how we've got to deal with Iran. If we don't deal with Iran, then oh my goodness, what's going to happen in the world? Well, what might happen to Israel and their interests in the Middle East, but really are not happening to us. And we already pay off Israel. We pay them $10 to $20 million a month. $10 million straight just for the military, millions more on top of that, and then we bribe the Arab countries around them not to attack them. Now, they might lose that protection if the Arab countries like Saudi Arabia, for instance. Saudi Arabia is the major powerful powerhouse linchpin that we rely on, and somewhat on Jordan, but they're not going to be as reliable if Saudi Arabia suddenly bails, and they stop taking the bribes to not, attack Israel, basically. And again, that's why for Israel they see this as such an existential crisis. But a lot of times, because of the major evangelical and other support, like Jordan Peterson isn't even a Christian himself, but the major support, believing, oh, Israel is this, tank hole of democracy. I mean, even though they should be able to look after and take care of themselves at this point, powerful military, very wealthy country, access to dozens and dozens of billionaires and almost unlimited funds around the world. They are a financial powerhouse. Again, they should be able to take care of themselves. But we are expected to intervene in these affairs. And really, there's cause and effect. We meddle. Iran doubles down. Yeah, they're potentially a dangerous Islamic, Sharia theocracy and unstable that holds nuclear weapons. That could be, but again, Russia and China, if they're in alliance with them, and they depend on them. China buys up a lot of Iran's oil. That's going to kind of keep Iran in check, And of course, that's probably why it's in China's best interest and why they negotiated this. But of course, Ben Shapiro isn't so much saying this himself, even though he's pretty openly talked about this kind of stuff. They double down on the social issues, like this headline here, where they talk about Michael Knowles says we need to bring back public executions. Okay, yeah, might actually be a good idea. Matt Walsh with What is a Woman is pretty doubled down pretty well on dealing with these social issues. But again, George W. Bush, the neocon back then, claimed to care about the border and the social issues. They play whack-a-mole with the issues the conservatives care about, and then they want to actually speak up for them. And then they want to get us in the Middle East and destabilize different areas, and then the neolibs and the left and the media all want to bring those destabilized countries, mass relocate them, and ethnically displace old stock Americans and Europeans in their own countries. Because that's the mutual relationship. The aw shucks George W. Bush, and then the media saying, oh, he can't pronounce nuclear. That was all quite the act. Meanwhile, what did George W. Bush actually do? He stabilized the Middle East. He created Homeland Security, which is now being used against us. He built the security apparatus being used against our own people now. He opened up the borders, let mass illegal migration across the border while he claimed to be against that. He largely federalized with No Child Left Behind and other things. He more federalized education, which is now pushing these, we call it woke, degenerate policies on children. George W. Bush set up the mechanisms for all of this. And Daily Wire, while they claim to care about the social issues, and yeah, maybe they are doing some good on the issues, that's not doing any good when mass population upheaval and demographic change occurs. That's not going to vote for, because they're going to vote for the free stuff, and they don't care. Now, by large majority, they don't. Non-Western people are not voting for Western values. They just don't. And by Western, I don't mean the latest in most insane degeneracy. I'm talking about the old traditional West. First Amendment, Second Amendment, they don't care about that. They're not voting for it. Daily Wire is basically grifting off a little bit of shock jock value here. But for what society? For what country? We don't have it anymore. We're many nations in one. We haven't closed the border tomorrow, build the wall, and if you somehow, take out the cartels and everything, it doesn't matter. We're many nations in one. We're beyond that point at this point. The Daily Wire is more than happy to try to push what's left of us, or we're being picked clean as millions of people pour across our border and have kids on our dime, and we pay them to ethnically displace us. Daily Wire is concerned because Ben Shapiro himself said, I don't give a good bleep about the browning of America. Well, now let's put the flip side on that. of that. Well, against who? That he specifically means anybody but white people. He's like, I don't care. Not my people, not my concern. And he's openly said this before. And he's having Jordan Peterson say that, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who, by the way, her father championed Common Core. Yeah, go ahead and look that up. Mike Huckabee, he championed Common Core math. This useless garbage. You know, there's always this two-facedness with the neocons. Sometimes they seem to double down on social issues to differentiate themselves from the Liz Cheneys and the George W. Bushes. But 10, 20 years from now, they will be the Liz Cheneys and the George W. Bushes, while they are actually pushing us into World War III by way of Iran and Syria and meddling in Syria. Just like Jerry Nadler on the floor of the Senate the other day saying, no, we have to be involved in Syria. We can't pull out anybody with Syria because we have to stay there for Israel. Why? They need to take care of themselves. This involvement is not good for any involved. And this meddling around the Middle East, it's destabilized, it's destroyed. I want you to draw a line from, go ahead and draw a line from Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. You see the pattern here? East going west. Then picked up again with Obama and Hillary. Again, neolibs, neocons, same side. Then moving further west, Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood, Libya, taking out Gaddafi for the sake of the central banks. Just constantly push from the east to go to the west. We already have arrangements with Tunisia and Morocco. They're probably, wiping their brows, sweating, hoping they're not going to be completely destroyed, because we kind of have arrangements or whatever with them. They're playing nice, I guess, with us enough. But like Gaddafi said, he said, I am the only thing, and I'm not saying Gaddafi was necessarily a good guy. What Gaddafi said was, I am the only thing stopping all of Africa from flooding into Europe. Wait a minute, the neolib goal is to have all of Africa flood into Europe. Had to take out Gaddafi, right? And then everything from the 13 hours that happened in Benghazi, the U.S. ambassador that was killed over there, the American men that were left fighting for their lives over there, and Hillary just sat back and did nothing. Again, for what? For these interests that are most definitely not in our interest and actually working toward our destruction. Daily Wire and the whole neocon apparatus. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, Jordan Peterson working for them, all these, the massive, massive group. We're going to have to separate the wheat from the chaff here. Of who is, they're not pushing us toward World War III in Ukraine, but they are pushing us toward World War III in Iran, and not our interests. And in fact, actually ultimately working against our interests. We're not the blessed nation whose God is the Lord. We're not being blessed for not looking out for our own people. That's what that's supposed to mean. Not looking out for another people in another country and another interest, and promoting a religion that's not even yours and a people that's not even yours above your own. That is, according to the Bible, that's a sin. That's not right to do. So how has it worked out for us? They're going to, the Republicans, the GOP, if we allow the new, more subtle neocons to get us involved in Iran. They mention getting involved in Iran, you know what side they're on. They're the new neocons, the neo-neocons, who maybe double down more strongly on social issues, to differentiate themselves from the George W. Bushes yesterday, but they will still mess us over in the exact same way, while they continue to destabilize the Middle East and continue to create more enemies overseas. We do not need to be involved with it when other wealthy nations can and should take care of themselves. This is Ozark Gilman. Y'all have a good one.